There are powers on Earth too hidden to be seen, and conspiracies too vast to comprehend. For years, the world has seen fact distorted, reality manipulated, and the truth concealed. Join the Pierre Sabak podcast to uncover the real meanings behind ancient aliens and their symbolism.
Hi, this is Pierre Sabak, unlocking the keys to the mysteries. Now today I'm going to look at the science of shapeshifting, and this is because the Djinn are said to be able to shapeshift or to dematerialize. We find this also within the traditions of the Seraphim as well. If you saw my previous video on the Seraphim, we mentioned in the book of Enoch that the Seraphim had the ability to take on the appearance of a human form, and so there is this connection between the angelic tradition and this idea of shapeshifters. And again, when we look at some of the etymologies, so for example, Archon, a serpent, is related to Akan, which is the Babylonian word for a serpent, a shining seraph, and we've got Akon, which is a type of apparition, a type of image. So Akon, which is an image. But again, there is this correspondence with seraph, and in the Egyptian Arabic, shofar, which is again a type of apparition or appearance. So there are these correspondences, again, Ayar, a serpent in the Old Semitic, and Ayar, which is a type of an appearance. So the serpent is a type of materialization, and again there is this dichotomy between the Ru'akh Elohim, the high spirits, which can be understood as a Djinn or Djinn, which is a serpent, which are the seraphic host, hence the Seraphim are often translated as a Djinn. We've got the Ru'akh Elohim, which are the high spirits, but they are materialized as an Elakeh, a living god or a high creature. Again, the terminology is polymorphic, and so I really just wanted to make a very short video on the Seraphim and the science of shapeshifting. Now, as I mentioned in my book Holographic Culture, the Elohim, the Seraphim, and the angelic hosts, these are all part of a holographic culture, and these are beings, technological beings, which have deconstructed the mechanics or the physics of physical reality. In other words, they understand the mechanics of reality, and therefore they can disassociate from the physical parameters of reality. They are an interdimensional race, and therefore they have control over the hologram, which is reality, and this is how they can effectuate their appearance, or how they can certainly put into people's minds. Also, there is this connection with telepathy as well. So for example, in the Arabic, the Karin is a type of companion Djinn, a type of familiar spirit, but the Arabic etymology is related to Kari, which is telepathic. So the Djinn are able to put ideas into people's minds. They are a telepathic species, and again, this idea that madness is related to the Djinn is found within the Arabic etymology of Majun, which is to be mad. In literal, it is to hide or to conceal the intellect. Jana, which is to hide or to conceal, which is the Djinn. The Djinn are an invisible race, which are connected to Djinn, which is the Old Semitic word for a serpent. So these are all important ideas which relate to the idea of shapeshifting, this idea that the Seraphim, that the Djinn can change their appearance. And I want to have a look at the scientist's work, Dr. Mikio Kaku. Now, he's the author of string field theory. Okay, so he is quite an important scientist in terms of quantum mechanics. Now, he uses molecular engineering to offer a possible solution to how the Seraphim might be able to transform themselves using nanotechnology in order to control externally their hologram. Now, Kaku himself, he's just actually referring to creating using nanotechnology essentially to create anything which is physical, and he believes that this might actually be possible. But when we apply his techniques, or when we apply the theoretical science behind this, then it's the extension of his ideas would be applicable also for a race of beings who could shapeshift. And so I'm saying that it would be plausible that they could be using this type or a similar type of technology. But whatever type of technology they're using, this is actually tied in to the quantum field, and is tied into the holographic field. It's very much tied into consciousness in terms of the relationship between the spirit and the materialization of the spirit into flesh, into perception. How we perceive reality is also very important also. Now, in his book Physics of the Impossible, Kaku's postulation on the future of quantum engineering explains, albeit inadvertently we could say, how an alien race could employ nanotechnology genetically in order to shapeshift, specifically to change the appearance of the alien into a human being. And I think that this is very important, because if we apply this science, this nanotechnology, in terms of quantum mechanics and quantum engineering, then it would be possible, if we could utilize nanotechnology, to actually use shapeshifting in order to change physically the form of a being. Now, I want to state here that although that this is only a hypothetical model, the scientific predictions which are advanced by Dr. Kaku, they are directly applicable to an extraterrestrial race. So just because we don't have the technologies, we do certainly have technologies which are indicative that using nanotechnologies, it might be possible to use nanotechnologies to engineer at a quantum level. Okay, and human beings have begun to do this at a very basic level. So we know that certainly the idea is a sound idea. Now, if Dr. Kaku's assertions are correct, then the technology discussed would provide a number of advantages to an invading host wishing to colonize amongst humans unnoticed. And this would be useful for us just to make reference to what those advantages may actually be. So first of all, the ability therefore to copy the human waveform. I think that this is important, because at the moment human beings we're at this level where we can copy things genetically, but the aliens may have gone beyond copying things at a physical level in terms of genetically. They may be able to copy the waveform. In other words, if they could copy the waveform, then they could copy the history of a being. And if they could copy the waveform, maybe they could also copy the soul pattern of a being as well, and that would encompass all states of the being, whether it's the being very old or very young, and possibly also information appertaining to past lives. So at a philosophical level, the idea of being able to copy the waveform, which in essence would be the aeonic spirit, which would be the waveform, which is materialized as a particle, is a very interesting idea. Now, the ability therefore to copy the human waveform, we could argue that it would certainly circumvent the potential problem of acclimatization for an alien race. Now, this would be particularly necessary for an off-world species visiting the Earth. In other words, they would be able to copy themselves, but by copying the waveform, they wouldn't need to worry about bugs or bacteria, because they would just be able to take someone from the Earth, copy their waveform, and then they would have that information contained within the waveform in order to, if you like, to vaccinate themselves. But we're talking about here at the waveform level. So this is at a very profound level. So in addition, the capacity therefore to change into a human being, it would give the alien race a profound insight into human psychology. And I think this is important also, because we must presume that an alien race would have a different biology. Their hormonal system is going to be different. They're not going to be wired up like a human being necessarily. They're not going to necessarily think like a human being. And again, the hormonal system interconnects into things such as sexuality, and understanding human sexuality is important in terms of understanding what motivates human beings, the psychology behind the human race. So being able to read the waveform is intrinsic to being able to understand human psychology. So this is all tied into the deconstruction of the human animal. And in particular, this would enable an alien race to understand the behavioural thought patterns, the drives and the motivations of human beings. Now, perhaps more sinister, we could say that the process of transforming from an alien into a human being could effectively engender the surveillance and manipulation of human societies politically and sociologically through the exploitation of sectarian revolutions, conflicts dependent upon religion or ideology. And I think that this is important also because, as I've mentioned before, I've argued within my book Holographic Culture that the deities and the gods, that they actually created the ship of state. The ship of state is a symbol of the opening wheels. It's this relationship between deities and mankind. The deities were worshipped by mankind. Again, the etymology of worship, ship, which is a boat, the veneration of an angelic vessel. We've also got religare, which is to moor a ship or a boat or a vessel, which is all going back into the angelic tradition. Malak, an angel, which is a polymorphic noun of malak, which is a sailor in the Hebrew. These are angelic sailors. Okay, so these beings, therefore, they would be able to implement a mirror image of their own governments. Gubernatio is to navigate or steer a vessel or a boat, where we'd get the etymology of government. And they have created, in my argument, the parallel society is this mirror image of heaven and earth. So the societies which we find, the holographic culture and the society which is intrinsic in heaven, it has been relayed within the systems found on the earth. And I think that this is very important because many people within ufology, and I've spoken to prominent ufologists, when you talk about alien intervention, or this idea that alien races may have created human societies and may have somehow intercepted human society, many ufologists will look at you with a blank expression and they will think that that is paranoid or conspiratorial. But I would say to you, if aliens are visiting this planet, then the idea that they could have intercepted human society, it's a given idea. I think it's a plausible idea. And even if people are not prepared to believe that, then it's certainly an idea which should be discussed, it's an idea which should be deconstructed, and it's an idea which should be understood better as well. Now, because we find that within the government and religion there are these boat signifiers, and the boat signifiers go back to this classified tradition, which is a classical tradition, classis, which is a naval fleet. We know that this goes back to the study of angels, angelology, the study of angelic beings. Malak, an angel, Malak, a sailor. Lordship, the noble class, are related to naval. Nobilis, which is to know. Okay, so essentially I want to now look at what Kaku had to say about shapeshifting, and I think that this is important in terms of understanding, at least at a theoretical level, how it might be possible that an alien species such as the Seraphim or the Djinn can take on another form, or they can change their outward appearance. Now, whether this is done telepathically, or whether this is done through nano or quantum engineering, or a combination of manipulating the hologram and the waveform, at the moment this is purely speculative. But I think Kaku, in terms of nano engineering, quantum engineering, is certainly a very useful place for us to begin to look at how advanced beings may be able to change their outward persona. So Kaku writes the following. Now, as I said before, he's not referring here to shapeshifting, but I think that his definition is applicable, or could be applied to beings who can shapeshift. They may be using this type of, or very similar type of technology. So this is what Kaku had to write about this idea of quantum engineering. He said that the miracle of life is nothing but a large nano factory capable at the atomic level of converting one form of matter, in other words food, into living tissue, for example a baby. In order to create a nano factory, one needs three core ingredients: building materials, tools that can cut and join these materials, and a blueprint to guide the use of the tools and materials. Now, in nature, the building materials are thousands of amino acids and proteins, out of which flesh and blood are created. The cutting and joining tools, like hammers and saws, that are necessary to shape these proteins into new forms of life are the ribosomes. They are designed to cut and rejoin proteins at specific points in order to create a new types of proteins. And the blueprint is given by the DNA molecule, which encodes the secret of life in a precise sequence of nucleic acids. These three ingredients in turn are combined into a cell, which has the remarkable ability to create copies of itself. That is self-replication. This feat is accomplished because the DNA molecule is shaped like a double helix. When it is time to reproduce, the DNA molecule unwinds into two separate helixes. Each separate strand then creates copies of itself by grabbing onto organic molecules to recreate the missing helix. Now, this is the important point here. So he's basically described DNA. He's also talked about what is necessary in order to shape matter, which is a large nano factory, and we need food, and we need building materials such as amino acids. Now, in terms of shaping these amino acids, he writes, so far physicists have had only modest success in their efforts to mimic these features found in nature, but the key to success, scientists believe, is to create hordes of self-replicating nanobots, which are programmable atomic machines designed to rearrange the atoms within an object. In principle, if one had trillions of nanobots, they could converge on an object and cut and paste its atoms until they transformed one object into another. Because they would be self-replicating, only a small handful of them would be necessary to start the process. They would also have to be programmable so that they could follow a given blueprint, in other words, a code or a template to write a human form. So, in other words, if you could use nanobots, to cut and paste atoms in order to transform one object. In this case, we're not talking about objects, but we're talking about living beings such as a seraphim, and transform it into a living being, which would be a human being. And so that would be the process of using nano engineering, in particular nanobots, at a very microscopic level, to actually engineer the cell. And this is important in order to be able to... So here, this is using nanobots to change the biological form or the biological appearance. Okay, that's essentially how shape-shifting and the different ideas related to shape-shifting, because again, it could be a combination of different ideas. It could be nanotechnology. It could be the manipulation of the hologram, or it could just be the manipulation of the mind, as we mentioned before, that these beings also have the ability not only to control what is seemingly their physical parameters, so they can create illusions such as the illusion of fire, but they can also create the illusion of changing, of transformation. This could be cognitive, it could be psychological, but here we could also be dealing with some kind of physiological effect. It could actually be physical, and the nanobot is an applicable explanation which would give, if you like, the scientific template for the hypotheses in terms of how we could bridge this gap between changing or transforming. Okay, that's essentially the Seraphim, and I've tried to give you a few plausible ideas about the science of shape-shifting. Hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have enjoyed this video, please pass my videos around. This is Pierre Sabak. Let's try and make this a better world. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you. Bye.